Have you ever wondered about life's biggest questions? Like, why am I here? What happens when we die? Or what else is out there? Well, we have, and we love to talk about it. And if you're listening, we think you probably do too. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Karen. And we've spent our lives searching for those answers, and we're seekers just like you.
We'll be talking to some of the most fascinating spiritual teachers, healers, and scientists, and showing you how you can use some of their spiritual practices for yourself.
We'll also be sharing stories of other seekers to motivate you to live your fullest life.
And we'll be translating it all, so the spiritual stuff won't feel so out there.
So if you're curious, get ready to rediscover why we're here together. We are so excited to have you here with us today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, Michelle, so let's start at the very beginning. Would you say that the terms past lives and reincarnation are interchangeable? And how would you define the idea overall?
Super interesting question. So I don't see the terms past lives and reincarnation as interchangeable, but they are actually connected. Reincarnation refers to the concept, the broader concept that after death, there's a continuation and that we are reborn again into a new body, right? That's the overall term reincarnation. What that implies, that there's a continuation, a cycle, that we lived before and we are living now, and then we'll live again after we die. Past lives are the way that we perceive that cycle individually. So the idea that we had a lifetime in the past, because time doesn't exist, not to wax too poetic here, but past lives are how we look and perceive the existence that we had prior to this one. Does that make sense?
That's really well said. Thank you. No, honestly, I didn't realize that's the way to distinguish them.
And you started with the very, very famous Dr. Brian Weiss. Tell us how you got started in all this. I'm really fascinated to hear.
Yeah, so I got the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, from my sister. And it was after she had a near-death experience in the hospital where he used to work. And she's totally fine. She had had a baby, and a complication from the epidural caused her to have a stroke. And during that stroke, she started speaking a language that no one recognized. And it wasn't gibberish. It had a very kind of strong emotional quality to it. And, after they saved her life, and like I said, she's totally fine. Now the baby's fine. He's actually 14 now. They gave her this book. They said, this guy who used to work at this hospital, wrote a book about past lives. And she gave it to me. And it just lit this kind of almost latent fire in me. It was the most compelling thing I'd ever read. And I was like, I have to meet this guy. Turns out I look on his website and he was giving a workshop in a few weeks somewhere where I was going to happen to be near. And I called them and they said, we have somebody dropped out, and it just kind of seemed meant to be. So I went to a weekend-long workshop that he was giving, and the workshop had a bunch of different group exercises. The last day he says, I know everybody has come here. People had come from Japan, from Mexico, from all over the world, Australia. I know everybody wants to do this. He says, but I can only take one volunteer to come up on stage. And the second he said that, I just knew it had to be me. I didn't, and I'm not somebody who feels like I get picked for things, and he did pick me, and I went up on stage, and in front of 500 people, I had an experience that not only changed my life, it changed the way I look at everything. After that, I came home and read everything I could get my hands on. And within 6 months, I knew that this was my life's calling. And I went back to him about 9 months later and asked him to teach me how to do this. And I've been doing it ever since.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you have to tell us about that experience. What was that experience?
In that regression, the very first thing I remember was looking down, and I was a man. And I'm a very strong, female identifying woman in this life, so that initial experience, just being a different gender, really just took a sledgehammer to the mirror of the concept of who I thought I was. It's like, wow, I'm a man. I also could feel that I wasn't very intelligent, which is funny. I pride myself in being well-read, educated in this life, but I could feel that I was a little bit of a simpler, I was a lumbering, hardworking, simple thinking man. The past life story itself is a lot about the loss of my mother. My mother died in 1977 when I was not yet 3 years old. And I didn't have any memories of her that I could recall from this life. And in that past life, she was my wife, and we were married, and we had 3 kids, and I just loved her so much. We were poor, but we were happy, very simple. And in that past life, she also got sick and died and left me with 2 kids. And I became consumed with my own grief and even could feel how indulgent I was with the grief. I was like ignoring my children and just not allowing myself any joy or any happiness in that current life. So there were so many different layers to that, understanding a lot about how my father grieved when my mother passed and how I needed to move on. And even though she's not here, we were together before, we'll be together again. How important my children were little at that time. So it was kind of like 20 years of therapy in about like a 30-minute period of time. It was profound. The shift was really, really swift because it was just, I could see it. This, what happened before, this is what it means in my life now. And this is what I need to change and shift in my life moving forward.
Wow. And you did that in front of 500 people.
I did. and my now ex-husband was in the audience. After that, we actually got this really like beautiful conscious divorce, where it's just kind of like, I love him. I wish him well. He's happily remarried. Like, that was part of the journey as well, that it was really this kind of crossroads in my life. And when I went home from that experience after meeting Brian, the past lives just started tumbling out. I was getting them several times a week, dreaming about them. I had a meditation CD that I used that I eventually no longer needed to use. And when I came back to him 9 months later, I said, this is how many past lives I've remembered. And I remember his face. He's kind of like, that's a lot.
Oh my God.
I thought that was normal. I thought that was for everyone. And it was just my guides showing me that this was my thing, to watch people just have those realizations themselves and change their lives in the way that I was able to. It's the most gratifying experience. And I have the best job in the world. I really do.
Did you have intuitive abilities going back in your life? Because I know you have these other abilities. So how did that all?
The answer is yes. But at the time as a child, I always felt different. I always felt like I knew things that other people didn't. I was a medium from an early age. And I remember I don't remember my mother being alive because she was sick for a long time, but I do have some memories from that time period right after she passed. And I remember my dad, being like, well, she's gone. She's not here. And I would be like, well, she's right here. Like I could hear her talking to me. I could sense her presence. And I started to realize, though, that when I said things like that to my father, that it caused him pain, that it wasn't healing for him. It made him worried about me or think that I was crazy or that I wasn't grieving properly. But I used to have a lot of night terrors when I was a child, recurring dreams that I've now connected to past life memories. That's very common. A lot of children talk about past lives in a very kind of practical way. Next time you're around a 3-year-old, ask them if they remember before when they used to be big. I kind of had a sense always that I had been someone else before, but because I grew up in a very religious environment that did not believe in reincarnation or past lives, nobody really talked to me about these things or explained them to me. So it just became buried until it came out in my, early 30s in kind of a really big way.
It's like that experience just really woke you up. It was like the door that opened everything for you.
It was actually probably what a lot of people call a Kundalini experience.
Right.
And I use these terms with a grain of salt, but I barely slept for 6 months after I met Brian Weiss because I was I was so just open and in tune and I knew things. And after a while, I had to learn how to come back down to earth. But they say a Kundalini awakening happens often in the presence of a great spiritual master, which certainly Brian Weiss is, or when you're ready to step into your life's purpose.
And how many past lives have you gone back to?
So right now the number is 43, which is as exhausting as it sounds. But that's how much I needed to change. I'm not a guide who's studied the map. I've actually walked the trail. And sometimes I go back to other points in time in the same past life. It'll be like, okay, I'll be, in my late 20s. And then years later, I'll explore something that happened in that same past life in my 50s. It's difficult, deep, inner psychological work. So,
and I'm sure there's a new almost aha that comes each time, right?
Yes. A new level of awareness and a new level that you're being asked to step into. This is about like evolving. This is wisdom, right? That we can use in our life right now. So I can't just be like, oh, I was this in a past life and then not do anything with it. I have to change. I have to grow. I have to become a better version of myself. Who you were in a past life only interests me as far as it's impacting you in your life right now today.
When you were going through your experience for the first time, I know a lot of people ask this question. How do you know that you're not just making it up in your own head?
Fabulous question. Fabulous. Thank you for asking it. Can we definitively prove the existence of past lives? I don't know if we can right now. For me, and also too, Brian Weiss, who's an MD psychiatrist, he'll say, even if you made it up, it's still true, right? So on a Jungian psychological level, it's been my experience that something that's fantasy or projection or something that you saw in a film or read in a book and an actual memory is that the memory has an emotional quality to it. So I'll get people that'll say, how do I know I didn't make that whole thing up? And I'm like, well, but you've been crying for the last 20 minutes. Let experience trump belief, right? That's kind of something that I often ask people to do. Even if you don't believe in past lives, be open to what you experience. Past life memories are very emotional. They really are. And I think that it would be difficult to make that up. But we find out when we die.
That's true. One idea that people may not be familiar with is that you can be a man, a woman. You can be all different races. Can you speak to that a bit?
100%. If people really understood how reincarnation works in a practical level, there would be world peace. There would be equality. That's one of the things that I'm really kind of dedicated to in my work is telling people you think that you're your body and you're not your circumstances. You're not your body. You're a soul. That for me, that entry point, just being a different gender, that really just opened up this myriad of possibilities for me. Reincarnation truly is universal, and it is possible to reincarnate in your own family. Some people are drawn to certain places over and over again. That's usually an indicator that there are unfinished business or patterns you're not breaking. So it's kind of like if somebody has 3 past lives in a row in New York City, it's like, okay, we need to look at that. What's happening here?
Totally. Yes.
So how come do you think that we don't remember our past lives? You were saying earlier that little ones kind of come in with some of those memories, and then we get to be adults and we need you to help us to remember them. How come we don't remember?
I think that we are born remembering a lot more than we really honor in this culture. I'm kind of a spiritual anthropologist in a certain way. There are tribes in Africa, when a baby's born, they chant, "Welcome back. Thank you for remembering us." I think that we are born remembering, and then our culture and our thinking minds and what we're educated to, right, or conditioned towards, we bury it. So what I do is I just help people remember what I feel they already know inside of them.
How would you define karma?
Great question. Yes. Thank you for that. Karma, I think, is one of those terms that gets misused way too much. I think that there's this doom and gloom, like, you did something bad in a past life, therefore you're doomed to a certain, fate in this life. Karma is more about bringing things into balance. It's not about punishment. It's about lessons and evolution. For example, if you had a past life where you didn't make the most loving choices, because I don't really talk about good choices or bad choices. I always go back to how loving they are or not, right? And that means loving to ourselves as well. If you didn't make a loving choice, chances are that person that was impacted will come back in your life. Maybe they'll be your high school boyfriend. Maybe they'll be your boss at your first job out of college, or whatever it is. They'll come back into your life in order to give you another pass at it, another chance and another go, okay? Because we always have choices. So it's kind of like, okay, the boss who fires you, do you slander him, or do you say, okay, thank you for the lessons and walking, right? So that's more about balance. That's the way that I see karma, and that's how I see it play out in a practical way with the experiences people have with me doing past life regression.
There's no coincidence that we're in this lifetime.
Right.
Together, we put ourselves in the position to learn more lessons, to evolve.
This seems to be what I would describe, and this is particularly more in the last, I would say even 3 to 5 years. It's a time of soulmate reunions. there are many types of soulmates, right? Like you guys are soulmates. You're doing this project together, right? You date people who are soulmates. You have children who are your soulmates. You make friends that are your soulmates. It's about coming together for this mutual purpose and evolving together. I've noticed that, and I've been doing this long enough that I can track this. Like more people are meeting soulmates now of various types than I think ever before in order to kind of help propel us forward to where we are going.
Can you talk a little bit about how people who haven't had a past life regression might be able to see clues of their past life? In other words, is déjà vu a clue? Is a dream a clue? Is it all of a sudden sort of quickly falling in love with, the guy across the street who might be your soulmate?
Totally.
And or could it be phobias?
I work with a lot of people with phobias. That's a huge one. And that's a really kind of practical example of how a past life could show up now. Like, right, you have a fear of closed off spaces. And in a past life, you were the Pharaoh's concubine and got buried alive next to him when it was your time. That's actually a real one I've seen.
I feel like that is me, and that could happen. We will talk about, Karen and I both had a past life regression with you, which changed both of our lives. But I do think that when I do it again, that may actually be one of mine.
That you feel like that might be one? Yeah. Did I just pull that out of, or you're
I don't know, but it's so irrational.
Yeah.
My fear is irrational.
Because it more than likely doesn't come from an experience you had right now, but the emotion of it and the fear connected to it can be very real. Going back to your question, Karen, initially, I find that when I ask most people who they think they were in a past life, they're usually right. I'll say, is there a place you've ever been before that you felt like you've been there before? So it's kind of like, I worked with one woman once who her husband had bought her a gift certificate to work with me. And she's like, I don't believe in any of this. And I had come to her apartment to do it. And she had all these little like figurines that were like from like Egypt. I was like, oh, well, tell me about this. And she's like, oh, I love going to Egypt. I go there all the time. I said, oh, okay. And you don't believe in past lives? She had a past life in ancient Egypt. And it's like a chicken or egg thing. Did she like Egypt because she was there in a past life, or did she have a past life because she liked Egypt? We don't really know. Like you said, the connections with other people, soulmate, you meet someone, they feel familiar, like you've known them before. A lot of people have dreams about past lives. Like I said, I did when I was a child. And like I said, it's just because we don't speak about it in such a practical, down-to-earth way in this culture like we do in other cultures. People are like, oh, past lives, that's crazy.
And what do you think about déjà vu? How would you define it?
Déjà vu is interesting. When I have déjà vus, they're usually connected to something I saw before in a dream. I call it like a little like blip in the matrix. It's almost like if everything is energy, and it's something that we call synchronicity, right? Synchronicity is a term that we use to describe a coincidence that isn't a coincidence. So it's like people have a déjà vu and then see 11:11. I feel like the déjà vu sensations that we experience are connected to our awakening. It's almost like an opening. A lot of people have a lot of them connected to different periods in their life. This happens to me. I'll have a bunch of them, and I can track that period of time to big shifts and changes that I was going through in my life, even if I didn't realize it at the time. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does.
It's a little blip in your consciousness.
I like thinking of it as a blip.
For those who have not had a past life experience with you, can you just give us, a very high level of what somebody could expect when they have a session with you?
Yeah. So when you have a session with me, we first spend some time discussing, various experiences you've had, what you'd like to discover. And I ask people a lot of questions about how they dream. Dreams are very connected to regressions in that we're visiting the same location, meaning the unconscious mind, that people experience their dreams. So people who are very visual dreamers will tend to have visual past life regressions. People who kind of have a more ethereal sense, feel, know kind of thing going on in their dreams, that'll be how they tend to experience the regression as well. People telling me dream stories kind of gives me a lot of information, not only about how they perceive their unconscious, but their relationship with their inner selves. My job as their guide is to figure out how to best fix them into that relaxed inner space. And then we do the actual regression, which, people are reclining, and I just guide them to relax enough that they're receiving images and receiving information, but yet the part of them that's very conscious, the part of you that knows who you are today, is always there. I also work with people's spirit guides too. So I'm kind of opening that space. It's also opening a channel. I'll say, during the passive regression, allow it to come to you. Your guides are going to show you your past lives. And I'll guide them through these different, almost snapshots in a period of time. I don't know if you guys felt that was true. It's like, how many moments in time do you have in a life? Millions. You're revisiting a moment in time in a past life. And so that's why I kind of leave it open. Your guides know what moment in time that's most impacting you right now. It's always amazing to me because it's always the right one. It's never what you're going to guess it's going to be or expect it to be, but it's always that right one.
There is sort of an order that you go in to get somebody there. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so there is a formula, and my formula is based on what I learned from Dr. Brian Weiss. I start with a technique called grounding. I have people look down at their feet first. And this is in their mind's eye, right? I had one person ask me, like, well, when do I open my eyes? I was like, there isn't a time machine. It's like past life tourism, it doesn't exist. It's an inner journey. Once I relax them and I feel that they're receiving these images from their unconscious, I use imagery of doors because doors are open. They're also transporting, right? The idea of door as a portal. And on the other side of that door, I have them look down at their feet, so it's grounding, so that they can see they're in their body. Then I have them look up their body, ask them what kind of clothing they have on. I'll ask them what gender they are. Once we establish who you are, we try to establish where you are. I have people look around. Then there's an organic unfolding of the story. And like I said, it is about storytelling. It's figuring out, okay, wait, I'm not my body. Where am I? What am I experiencing? Who else shows up? If somebody encounters another person, I have them look into their eyes. I'll ask them, do they remind you of someone? Maybe someone you know in this life. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. So there's an energetic recognition. That past life regression experience is so dense. It's like identity, culture, circumstance, soulmates. Like it's just a very dense piece of information. They're generally about 45 minutes to an hour, depending, but it's stuff that people end up thinking about and going through for months and months afterwards, because it's a very dense piece of material. For me as a life coach, I'm more concerned with patterns. So it'll be like, oh, I had a past life in 1965 that I was doing this. Oh, and then I had one in 2000 BC where I was doing the same thing. So that's a really long pattern. I need to break that, right? Sometimes it will be later in that same past life. But like I said, it's about these snapshots in time that are connected and related. And then I'll move that person to what I call the last day of that life. And we go through the entire scenario of that past life death, which is probably the most important part of the whole thing, right? There's a lot of spiritual work we do around death and dying. And even if you're a medium and had a lot of experiences with it yourself, it's still a great unknown. From an energy medicine perspective, meaning that we carry things energetically with us from our past lives. It's not the past life that impacts you. It's the way that past life made you feel. We kind of go through that death scene because that does tend to be like a really important kind of hotbed. I think that the two most profound experiences, and I love watching people have these because they're life-changing in of themselves, is when you look down at your feet and you're not in the body you were just in. And then the next moment is when your consciousness separates and you're like, wait, I was just in that body. I don't have a body, but yet my consciousness exists. Those two experiences alone are life-changing. And those are the two bookends of the past life regression. And then once we're in that spiritual state, we explore a little bit more about purpose. I ask people, what was the lesson you learned from living that life that's most important for you to know? The reason that we wait till they're in that spiritual state is because, you're a little wiser. You're kind of in tune with your journey over many lifetimes. People say things to themselves that are really profound. Like I said, your higher self may be speaking to your current self. So that in essence is the skeleton of the regression, because fill in the blank, there are a lot of variables that can and do happen. And I think you guys know this because both of you had two very different experiences that were within that same framework. So expect the unexpected is what I always tell people.
One other question I have from the process is your role, in addition to helping guide in some ways, what are you seeing as somebody is actually going through a regression?
When I'm doing passive regression work with a client, I'm connecting energetically to them. And once I do that, I'm able to see and experience the regression with them. I don't know how it happens. It's just a gift I have, but it really kind of helps me be in it with them. Over the years, I've developed that as kind of connected to my shamanic training, in that I'm able to kind of journey to the spirit world on behalf of that person. So I'm a clairvoyant. I see it, and I'm also a clairsentient. I'll feel it, but I can really sense, see, feel what the person is experiencing in the past life regression. It's really just so that I can be a guide and really kind of be in it with them and fully support them.
There's a little bit of a fear factor going into this too, because you're not sure what is going to be behind that door. You're not sure who you're going to be and what you're actually going to see there. And I think that was what was so comforting, to have you guiding us through that experience and letting us know that there wasn't anything, to fear, that we were still in control with that of the experience.
Yeah, it's important, especially people's first time doing this, that they feel supported, because, it is intense. It's emotionally intense, and it's death and it's dying. It's, deep spiritual work. But I think that most people are scared that they're going to be, they're not going to like what they find, or they're like, oh, I'm going to discover I was a bad person in a past life, or, whatever it is too. And that rarely happens. Although we're evolving. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I've killed people in my past lives. Like, don't judge me for what I did in the Stone Age. Like, I've evolved since then. We all have. It can be scary, but once you get into it, you realize it's actually not, right? It's very relaxing, and even if it's an unpleasant memory, it's a really joyful experience.
Yeah. And there's no pain, I think when you're talking about taking you to that last moment in a lifetime where you're dying, you don't actually feel the pain. You may feel some emotion, but you're not feeling pain. And I think that's important for people to know.
I used to have a profound fear of dying from having a mother. My mother was only 29 when she died. I remember turning 30 and being like, what do I do now? I always just assumed I was going to die too. I've lost my fear of death through this work. Having that experience where, like you said, there is no pain. And also too, just that shift in awareness where, being in spirit form is our home.
Yes.
I have a lot of people that don't want to come back at the end. They're kind of like, can I just stay in this spiritual space? And actually that was true with you, Karen. How long were you?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. You let me sit there for, I don't even know how long it was.
I think it was about 20 minutes.
It was. I was just going to say, Michelle and I can tell you it was 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Just talking about the process, that what you do for this is not actually hypnotizing someone. Mm-hmm. You are in a deep trance, but I think, as you pointed out, you still are aware enough.
Yeah.
That if you needed to get out of it, you could. That was a fear of mine.
Bringing that up. Okay. People are terrified of me when I say hypnosis because they feel like there's mind control involved. There's no mind control. These people that do the stage hypnosis stuff where people get up on stage and they quack like a duck or bark like a dog, they're choosing people who want to participate in the show. The person who's in the audience going, I would never bark like a dog. I would never do that. That hypnotist cannot get that person to do that. No one can make you do anything against your will. What hypnosis actually is, it's a state of relaxation and heightened concentration. We actually move in and out of states of hypnosis all day. Okay? People listening to this podcast at this point are already in a state of hypnosis because the background noises have drifted away. They're focused on, hopefully, what we're saying. People describe road hypnosis, right? You drive in your car and it feels like 20 minutes, but it was 2 hours and you had all these great ideas. We have great ideas in the shower. So that's just right under the surface. We're relaxing and allowing ourselves to have a dialogue with our unconscious mind. We do it all day. The imagination is the gateway to the unconscious. So is it hypnosis? Yes, but I've been trying to break up with that term for a while because of the connotations.
And what's been one of the most mind-blowing moments that you've had going through this experience with someone?
it's funny because I do sometimes talk about this, like we were saying, like, oh, a normal day at the office, like someone had a past life where their head was chopped off and a birthmark that was on their neck for years and years disappeared suddenly.
Really?
Yes, I've seen birthmarks disappear a few times. The spontaneous healings are the ones that really blow my mind. There was a man I worked with who he was about to have his 4th back surgery, and it was the same lumbar number on his spine every time. And, he was a normal guy. I wasn't like a frail guy or anything like that, but he said the last time he'd broken his back, he was changing a light bulb. And, he had this past life story emerge that was connected to that, and it was emotional. And he had walked in with a cane, and he walked to the door and then said, "Oh, I forgot my cane." And then he was like,
wow.
"Oh, I forgot my cane."
Wow.
He hadn't walked without a cane even 2 steps in several years. He never had that last back surgery. I have a lot of stories that are so profound. Usually I'm in awe as much as they are. Sure. Because it's the power of spirit really to connect you to that place within yourself where you can heal yourself. It's not about being a healer. It's about being a conduit to help people heal themselves, because all healing comes from within. And like I said, this past life regression technique is a really powerful way to kind of get to whatever it is that you're carrying or holding that needs to go.
All the people that could benefit, right? If they can just recognize that they're carrying so many memories that they can, if they can just release them, right? They can heal from.
Absolutely. I don't think that there's anyone that couldn't benefit from this. And like I said, not everybody's open or ready. We're evolving, right? We chose to reincarnate. We're in a body right now. We're evolving. We're growing. This is such a powerful tool to evolve more consciously. I do believe that if everyone on planet Earth experienced a past life regression, it would change the entire consciousness of this place and everyone in it instantly.
What would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about past life regression, or what people think of you as a past life regressionist?
I think the hypnosis part is connected to the biggest misconception, or people who are skeptical about the belief in reincarnation. People will say like, "Oh, I'd love to do that, but I'm Catholic and I don't believe in that." Well, then I have to remind them that reincarnation was an official tenet of Christianity till the year 462, which was when the Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire, when Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, and they had to vote on what the codified rules were, and reincarnation did not make that cut. And it was because Emperor Constantine's mother thought, well, if people think they have more than one chance, then they're not going to really behave. So it was more about like social control and instilling fear in people, like be good or else. I think in general, people have a certain amount of fear based on our culture's attitudes, beliefs, conditioning about hypnosis, about psychics, about buried knowledge. And one of the things I'm working hard to do is to change people's attitude and perception about how that works. If we can make that leap as a culture, there's a lot we can do moving forward from that. You're not your body.
Yes.
And all of the connotations that come with that if I were to say there's a little snapshot into like the essence of what my life's work is to teach people that there's just so much more to our existence than what we can know and perceive. It's so much about love and so much about healing and releasing and accepting yourself and your journey for what it is, and all of the beautiful layers that come with that.
If I'm interested in getting a past life regression, how would you suggest I go find, if it's not you, you're not in my area, and I want to do a face-to-face, how would I go about finding one?
I created an online course that if you can't do a session with me or can't afford it or whatever, that it's a series of video modules that is basically in essence a private session with me that you can do at home. I always tell people, use your intuition. I get people that tell me this all the time. They're like, they'll Google it and then be like, I just felt drawn to your site, right? Go where you feel led. There are good people who do this. I don't have a certain person I send people to. I give people more resources and more ways to work with me. I have a meditation MP3 that's a full past life regression on my website. I have things on YouTube. It's kind of like I want everyone to experience it, but I think part of the reason that I don't recommend people is that a session with me is a little bit unique. And so because I combine a lot of different modalities, I'm a medium, I'm a shaman, I'm an energy medicine practitioner. I don't know anybody else who does it in the way that I do it.
One of the major concepts that I hope people walk away with today is that we are not our body.
Yeah.
Which, Michelle, you've said. And I know that I've been telling everybody that ever since I had that experience with you a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. We are not our body. And as you said, we would have so much more peace within our world if everybody could experience and understand that.
Yeah.
But I now know that for real.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ability to have that self-love by being able to step out and really see yourself as the soul that you are, that's the experience that you gave us, at least for me. It was,
and like I said, it changes the way that you look at yourself. It changes the way you look at others.
Yep.
Thank you. If you want to visit Michelle Brock's site, go to Michelle with 2 L's -Brock, BROCK.com. And we'll also have her information on our website as well. Okay. Mwah.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.